The snow hadn't stopped falling for 3 days. At 4:12 a.m., Ethan Cole sat alone in his freezing rental house, watching frost creep across the window while unread emails piled up on his screen. His coffee was cold, his hands were shaking. In the next room, his 6-year-old daughter burned with fever. With one trembling breath, Ethan sent the email that ended his career. He thought that was the end. 3 hours later, as snow buried the street outside, his CEO stood on his front porch uninvited, and nothing would ever be the same again. Denver at 4 in the morning looked like the end of the world. Ethan Cole pressed his forehead against the icy window, watching the snow fall in sheets so thick he couldn't see the streetlight across the road. Behind him, his laptop screen cast a sickly blue glow across the cramped living room. The heating had clicked off an hour ago again, and his breath came out in small clouds. The coffee in his mug had gone cold 2 hours earlier. He hadn't noticed. On the screen, red notification after red notification climbed into triple digits. System alerts. Database warnings. Angry emails from Victoria Blackwood, CEO of Datacrest Technologies, each subject line more aggressive than the last. Critical. Production server down. Where are you? Final warning. Board meeting in 4 hours. Ethan's hands hovered over the keyboard. He knew the fix, knew exactly which line of code had failed, which backup protocol hadn't triggered. He'd built that system from the ground up 3 years ago, back when his wife Sarah was still alive, back when he still believed he could balance everything, back when Mia didn't spend every night asking why Daddy was never home. From the bedroom down the hall came a wet, hacking cough that made his stomach twist. He'd given Mia the last dose of children's ibuprofen at midnight. Her fever had been 103.4. Now it was almost dawn, and he had no idea if it had broken or climbed higher. The phone on the table buzzed. Another call from Victoria's direct line. The fourth one tonight. He let it ring out. Ethan rubbed his eyes until he saw stars. The numbers on the screen blurred together. Server uptime percentages. Response codes. Revenue lost per minute of downtime. Datacrest processed financial transactions for 43 major banking institutions. Every second the system stayed offline cost the company thousands of dollars. Every minute edged them closer to breach of contract penalties. And Ethan was the only person alive who could fix it in under an hour. His laptop camera light blinked green. Someone was trying to video call him. He closed the window without answering. 3 years. That's how long it had been since Sarah died, giving birth to the son who'd only lived 6 days. 3 years since Ethan became the sole parent to a 3-year-old who didn't understand why mommy wasn't coming home. 3 years of 60-hour work weeks, daycare pickups at 6:59 p.m. when they closed at 7. Dinners from cardboard boxes. Bedtime stories cut short by emergency pages. 3 years of Mia asking, "Daddy, do you have to work tonight?" 3 years of saying yes. Another cough rattled from the bedroom. Deeper this time. Wet. Ethan's hands started shaking. He pushed back from the desk, chair legs scraping against cheap linoleum. The hallway was dark and cold. Mia's door stood half open, the nightlight casting long shadows across her walls. She'd kicked off the blankets again. Her small body curled into a tight ball, shivering. Her lips looked blue. Ethan's heart stopped. He crossed the room in 2 strides, pressed his palm to her forehead. Burning. Still burning. Maybe hotter than before. Her breath came in shallow gasps, each one whistling slightly. "Daddy?" Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. "I know, baby." He pulled the blankets back up, tucked them around her shoulders. "I'm right here. Is it morning?" "Almost. Do you have to go to work?" The question hung in the freezing air between them. From the living room came the harsh buzz of another incoming call. Another emergency. Another crisis only he could solve. Ethan looked down at his daughter's face. 6 years old. The spitting image of her mother. Sick, scared, alone. Always alone. No, he whispered. I don't. Ethan sat in the dark living room, Mia finally asleep against his shoulder, her fevered forehead pressed into the hollow of his neck. Outside, the snow had begun to taper off. But the damage was done. 2 feet of it buried the street, the sidewalk, his rusted Honda Civic. The laptop screen glowed in front of him. He'd silenced his phone an hour ago. 23 missed calls, 14 voicemails, 37 unread emails. He opened a new message. Typed 3 words into the subject line, letter of resignation. His fingers hovered over the keys. He'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his head. Imagine drafting a professional 2 weeks' notice letter, full of corporate pleasantries and gratitude for opportunities received. Imagined sitting down with Victoria Blackwood in her glass-walled office, shaking hands, maintaining his dignity. But that was before Mia's fever spiked, before he realized he'd missed her school play last week, before he found himself explaining to a 6-year-old why Daddy couldn't read bedtime stories anymore because emergencies never sleep. Ethan began to type. Victoria, effective immediately, I resign from Datacrest Technologies. I will not be providing 2 weeks' notice. I will not be fixing tonight's server failure. I will not be answering any further calls or emails. For 3 years, I've given this company everything. Every late night, every weekend, every moment I should have spent with my daughter. And for what? So you could threaten me when I dare to prioritize her health over your board meeting? My daughter is sick. She's 6 years old, and she's burning up with fever. And I'm done choosing server uptime over her welfare. Find someone else to be your machine. Ethan Cole. He read it once, didn't edit. Added the entire HR department to CC, added the board of directors, added every executive who'd ever sent him a 2 a.m. Slack message. His cursor hovered over the send button. This was career suicide. He'd be blacklisted from every tech company in Denver. 3 years of work, of building reputation, of proving himself after Sarah died, all of it gone in one email. Mia stirred against his shoulder, mumbled something in her sleep. Her forehead still burned against his skin. Ethan clicked send. The whoosh sound felt like jumping off a cliff. He closed the laptop, unplugged his phone, carried Mia back to her bedroom and tucked her in properly this time, with 3 blankets and her stuffed elephant pressed into her arms. He checked her temperature again, 102.8. Still high, but lower than before. Progress. Ethan returned to the living room and stood at the window. The snow had stopped completely now. The street lay buried under white silence. No cars, no movement, just the soft orange glow of streetlights reflecting off untouched drifts. For the first time in 3 years, his phone wasn't ringing. For the first time in 3 years, no one needed him to fix anything. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan Cole went to sleep without setting an alarm. The pounding on the door started at 7:43 a.m. Ethan jerked awake on the couch, disoriented. Sunlight streamed through the frost-covered windows. His neck ached from the awkward angle he'd been sleeping at. The knocking came again, urgent, insistent, the kind of sound that said, "This is not going away." He stumbled to his feet, checking Mia's room first. Still asleep, temperature down to 100.2. He pulled her door closed and moved toward the front of the house. Through the frosted glass panel, he could make out a silhouette. Tall, expensive coat. Ethan opened the door 6 inches, keeping the chain lock engaged. Victoria Blackwood stood on his porch. The CEO of Datacrest Technologies, the woman who hadn't left her office suite for anything less than board meetings and investor calls, stood on the sagging wooden porch of his rental house in southeast Denver, snow covering her $1,000 coat, her designer heels completely impractical for the 2 feet of powder she'd apparently waded through to get here. Mr. Cole. Her voice was clipped, professional, vibrating with barely controlled fury. "We need to talk." Ethan stared at her. At the snow melting off her shoulders, at the black SUV idling at the curb with a driver waiting inside. at the way her breath came out in angry clouds. "No," he said, and started to close the door. Her hand shot out, bracing against the frame. "The production server is still down. 43 banks can't process transactions. We're hemorrhaging money by the second. You're going to fix this." "No," Ethan repeated. "I'm not. This is breach of contract. I'll sue you for. Sue me." The words came out flat. "Dead. I own nothing worth taking. This house is rented. My car is 12 years old. My bank account has $1,800 in it. Go ahead. Sue me for the cost of my daughter's medical bills." Something flickered across Victoria's face. Not quite uncertainty, but close. "Mr. Cole, my daughter was burning up with fever while you sent me 14 emails demanding I fix your servers." Ethan's voice rose despite himself. She's 6. She's 6 years old, and she's been asking me for months why I'm never home. And last night, I finally figured out the answer." Victoria's expression hardened. "Your personal circumstances don't. Get off my porch. The board meets in 2 hours. If you don't, I don't care about your board." Ethan's hands were shaking again, but not from cold this time. "I don't care about your servers. I don't care about your contracts or your revenue or your stock price. I care about my daughter, who I haven't put first in 3 years because I was too busy being your machine." Silence. Victoria Blackwood stared at him. Behind her, the SUV's engine rumbled. Snow began falling again, light flurries catching in her dark hair. Then, from inside the house, came a sound that made Ethan's blood freeze. Mia, coughing. Not the dry cough from last night, this one wet and rattling, the kind that meant fluid in the lungs, followed by a small, frightened voice. "Daddy?" Ethan turned without another word, leaving Victoria standing in the doorway as he ran toward his daughter's room. Mia sat upright in bed, her small body racked with coughs that sounded like tearing fabric. Her lips had gone pale, not the healthy pink they should be, but an ashen color that made Ethan's stomach drop. When she tried to take a breath between coughs, it came as a desperate wheeze, high-pitched and wrong. Her pajamas were soaked with sweat. The stuffed elephant lay forgotten on the floor where she'd knocked it in her struggle to breathe. Her small hands clutched at her chest like she could somehow force the air in manually. "Can't," she gasped. "Can't. Breathe." Ethan's training kicked in before panic could. 3 years ago, before Sarah died, he'd taken a pediatric first aid course at her insistence. He'd thought it was overkill at the time. Now his hands moved on autopilot, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought failed. He grabbed her inhaler from the nightstand. She'd had mild asthma since she was 4, inherited from Sarah's side of the family, and pressed it to her lips. "Deep breath, baby. Come on, look at me. Deep breath with Daddy." He demonstrated, exaggerating the motion, trying to get her to mirror him. She couldn't. Her chest heaved uselessly, ribs standing out stark against thin skin as her body fought for oxygen it couldn't get. The inhaler did nothing. Worse than nothing, it seemed to make her panic more, her eyes going wild with the realization that the thing that always helped wasn't helping. "Mia, look at me." He cupped her face in his hands, forcing himself to stay calm even as terror clawed at his throat. "Look at Daddy. We're going to count together, okay? 1, 2. She shook her head violently, eyes wide with panic, tears streaming down her flushed cheeks. Footsteps in the hallway, fast, purposeful, not the tentative steps of someone unsure whether to intrude. Ethan looked up to see Victoria Blackwood standing in the doorway of his daughter's bedroom, still wearing her snow-covered coat, water pooling on the cheap carpet beneath her ruined designer heels. She was staring at the scene with an expression he'd never seen on her face before in 3 years of working under her command. Uncertainty. Raw, unguarded uncertainty. The ice queen of Datacrest Technologies, who'd once dressed down a Fortune 500 CEO in front of his own board, looked lost standing in a 6-year-old's bedroom watching a little girl fight for air. "She needs a hospital," Victoria said quietly, her voice stripped of its usual corporate steel. Right now. Not in 10 minutes. Now. Roads aren't plowed, Ethan shot back, trying the inhaler again. Still nothing. Mia's breathing was getting worse. I can't drive in this. I have an SUV. Driver knows snow. Victoria pulled out her phone. I'll call ahead to Presbyterian. They'll be ready. Ethan stared at her. This was Victoria Blackwood, the woman who'd once made a senior engineer cry in a meeting, who'd fired 3 directors in one day, who ran Datacrest like a military operation with zero tolerance for weakness, and she was offering to help. Mia coughed again, this time bringing up phlegm tinged with pink. Decision made. Go, Ethan said. Start the car. Victoria was already moving, phone to her ear, barking orders at someone on the other end as she disappeared down the hallway. Ethan wrapped Mia in her blankets, grabbed her elephant, and carried her through the house. She'd stopped trying to breathe normally now, just taking short, desperate sips of air. Her fingers dug into his shirt. The SUV's back door stood open. Victoria sat in the front passenger seat, still on the phone. Ethan climbed in with Mia, and the driver, a gray-haired man with steady hands, pulled away from the curb before the door fully closed. Pediatric ER is waiting, Victoria said without turning around. ETA, 12 minutes. The SUV navigated the snow-choked streets with practiced ease. Ethan held Mia against his chest, counting her breaths. 12 per minute, then 10, then 8. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her jaw tightened. The board meeting starts in 90 minutes. They're demanding answers. Then tell them, Ethan started. I'm telling them nothing. She silenced the phone and dropped it in her purse. They can wait. Ethan looked at the back of her head, stunned. Mia's breathing hitched. Stopped. Ethan's world narrowed to a pinpoint. Breathe, he whispered. 2 seconds. 3. 4. Then a gasping inhale, wet and horrible. But air. How much longer? Ethan's voice cracked. 4 minutes, the driver said calmly. Traffic's clear on Spear. Victoria turned in her seat to look at Mia for the first time. Her expression was impossible to read. She looks like you, she said quietly. She looks like her mother. Something passed across Victoria's face, recognition, maybe, or regret. The hospital appeared through the falling snow. The driver pulled directly up to the ER entrance, where 2 nurses and a doctor already waited with a gurney. Ethan carried Mia out, handed her to the doctor, watched them disappear through automatic doors, and then he stood there in the snow, shaking, unable to move. Victoria Blackwood stood beside him. Come inside, she said. You're freezing. For the first time since Sarah died, Ethan let someone else take charge. The diagnosis came 40 minutes later. Bilateral, aspiration, pneumonia. Fluid in both lungs. Oxygen saturation at 82% when normal should be 95 or above. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense hands, explained that Mia had likely inhaled mucus or vomit while sleeping, which triggered the infection. They were admitting her immediately to the pediatric intensive care unit. She'll need IV antibiotics for at least 3 days, the doctor said, making notes on a tablet. Respiratory therapy every 4 hours. We'll keep her on supplemental oxygen until her levels stabilize. The good news is we caught it early enough. Kids this age, their lungs are resilient. Should. The word hung in the air like a threat. Ethan sat in a plastic chair in the pediatric wing, staring at nothing. Victoria had disappeared somewhere he hadn't noticed when. Hospital sounds filtered through his consciousness without meaning. Beeping monitors. Hushed conversations. The squeak of rubber soles on linoleum. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He'd forgotten he had it. 49 missed calls. 63 unread emails. His finger hovered over the power button to turn it off again. Then he saw the email subject lines. Not from HR. Not from Victoria. From the board of directors. From banks. from regulatory agencies. Emergency. Federal investigation opened. Suspicious system access patterns. Urgent. Embedded malware detected. Ethan's blood went cold. This wasn't just a server failure. Someone had sabotaged the system. And from the timestamps on the malicious code execution, it had happened during his shift while he was home with Mia. His access credentials, his security clearance, his digital signature all over the breach. He scrolled through the forensic logs, hands shaking for a different reason now. The attack was sophisticated. Targeted. Someone had used his VPN token to bypass every security layer he'd built, but Ethan had been offline for hours. His VPN had been disconnected since he sent the resignation email, which meant someone else had access to his credentials. Someone inside Datacrest. Mr. Cole? He looked up. Victoria stood there holding 2 cups of terrible hospital coffee. She looked different somehow. Smaller, the armor of corporate authority stripped away by fluorescent lights and pediatric waiting rooms. "Your daughter's stable," she said. "They've got her on oxygen. The doctor says she'll recover fully with antibiotics and rest." Relief hit him like a physical blow. He had to grip the armrests to stay upright. Victoria sat down beside him, holding out one of the coffees. "They're letting you see her in 10 minutes. Ethan took the coffee without drinking it. "Someone framed me." "What?" He showed her his phone. The forensic logs. The timeline that proved he couldn't have executed the attack. Victoria's expression went from confusion to understanding to fury in the space of 3 heartbeats. "Who has access to your credentials?" "No one. They're biometrically locked." "Then how? Unless someone cloned my security token." Ethan's mind raced through the possibilities, which would require physical access to my workstation and administrative privileges to bypass the encryption. Victoria pulled out her own phone, started scrolling through access logs. Her jaw clenched tighter with each swipe. "Richard Hale," she said finally, "senior board member. He accessed the server room last night at 2:47 a.m. Ethan knew the name. Hale had been pushing for months to outsource Datacrest's security to a firm run by his nephew. "He's trying to get you fired," Ethan said slowly. "No, he's trying to get you replaced. If the board thinks you can't handle a security breach, they'll vote you out and pin it on you in the process." Victoria stood abruptly. That's why he wanted the board meeting moved up. He needs to present the evidence before anyone can verify the timeline. The meeting. Ethan checked his watch. "When does it start?" 20 minutes ago." They stared at each other. A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Cole?" "Your daughter's asking for you." Ethan looked at Victoria, at the phone in her hand showing the board meeting agenda, at the security logs that could clear his name and expose Hale's conspiracy. Then he looked at the nurse. "Go," Victoria said quietly. "I'll handle the board. They'll destroy you without proof. Then we get proof." She held out her hand. "I need your phone. And your access codes." Ethan hesitated. 3 hours ago, he'd quit, burned every bridge, sworn to never prioritize Datacrest over his daughter again. But Victoria Blackwood had driven through a blizzard to help him, had canceled her board meeting to get Mia to a hospital, had sat in a waiting room drinking terrible coffee instead of saving her company. He handed her the phone. 15 minutes, he said. "That's how long it'll take you to pull the server transaction logs and prove the timeline. But you'll need to do it from my workstation, and you'll need my biometric authentication to access the encrypted backup." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You're not seriously suggesting—" "I'm suggesting you bring my daughter's iPad," Ethan said, "and a good webcam. I can authenticate remotely from her hospital room." A slow smile spread across Victoria's face, the first genuine smile he'd ever seen from her. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I'm beginning to understand why I couldn't replace you." Mia looked tiny in the hospital bed, oxygen tube taped across her face, IV trailing from her small hand. But her eyes were clear when Ethan walked in, and she smiled. "Hey, baby, Daddy." Her voice came out raspy but strong. "The doctor says I get ice cream. As much as you want." He sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle any wires. "How do you feel?" "Tired. But not scary tired anymore." Ethan's throat tightened. "I'm sorry I let it get that bad. It's okay." She reached for his hand. "You came." The words hit harder than any resignation letter ever could. His phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. "At your workstation. Ready when you are." Ethan looked at his daughter. "Mia, I need to do something on the computer for a few minutes. Is that okay?" She nodded sleepily. "Are you fixing something?" "Yeah. But I'm not leaving you. I'm staying right here. Promise?" "Promise." He set up the iPad on the bedside table, angling it so he could see Mia and the screen simultaneously. Opened the secure connection to his workstation. Victoria's face appeared on screen, harsh fluorescent lighting making her look exhausted. Behind her, Ethan could see his empty cubicle. "The board meeting's in full swing," she said quietly. "Hale is presenting his case. He's got fabricated evidence that makes you look guilty and me look incompetent. How long until they vote?" 10 minutes. Maybe less. Ethan positioned his face in front of the iPad's camera. The biometric scanner activated, reading his retina pattern. Green light. Access granted. "Walk me through," Victoria said. "What am I looking for?" For the next 8 minutes, Ethan guided her through the encrypted backup system he'd built. Layer after layer of security protocols, each one requiring his verbal authorization and biometric confirmation. Victoria's fingers flew across the keyboard, following his instructions with the precision of someone who'd built companies from nothing. Transaction logs appeared on screen. Timestamps. Access patterns. And there it was. Richard Hale's credential signature, accessing Ethan's VPN token at 2:51 a.m. Copying the encryption keys. Executing the malware injection at 3:14 a.m., exactly when Ethan's own access logs showed he'd been offline for 2 hours. "Got it," Victoria breathed. "Irrefutable proof. Time-stamped. Authenticated. He's done. Daddy?" Mia's voice, small and sleepy. Ethan turned away from the screen. "Yeah, baby? Is that the lady from our house?" On the iPad screen, Victoria Blackwood froze. "Yeah," Ethan said. "This is Victoria. She helped us get to the hospital." Mia waved weakly at the camera. "Thank you." Something cracked in Victoria's expression. Not the Ice Queen of Datacrest Technologies. Just a woman who'd maybe forgotten what it felt like to help someone without expecting anything in return. "You're welcome," she said softly. Victoria. Ethan caught her attention before she could disconnect. "Make them pay," she smiled. Cold, sharp. Exactly the expression he remembered from every board meeting he'd ever observed from the back of the room. "Oh, I intend to." The screen went dark. Ethan turned back to Mia, who was already drifting back to sleep, one hand still holding his. For the first time in 3 years, he'd chosen her first, and somehow, impossibly, it had been enough. The house was different now. Warmer. Not just because Ethan had finally fixed the temperamental heating system, though he had, along with the leaky faucet in the bathroom and the loose floorboard in the hallway that Mia always tripped over. But the real warmth came from something less tangible. It felt lived in now, like a home instead of a place where he occasionally slept between emergencies and crisis calls. The cramped living room that had once been dominated by his work laptop and scattered cables now had a reading nook in the corner, a comfortable chair, a floor lamp, shelves full of picture books that actually got read at reasonable hours, not rushed through at midnight when Mia was already half asleep. Mia sat at the kitchen table, tongue stuck out in concentration as she colored a picture of a snowman. Summer sunshine poured through the windows. The fever, the pneumonia, The terrifying night in the hospital, all of it felt like something from a different life. Ethan's laptop sat open on the counter, but for once, he wasn't staring at it. He was making pancakes. Real ones, from scratch, with chocolate chips arranged to look like smiley faces. His phone buzzed. Text from Victoria. Status update? Ethan smiled and typed back. Systems stable. No issues overnight. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Good. See you at the office Monday? After I drop Mia at camp. 9:30. Perfect. Oh, Hale's sentencing is Tuesday. Thought you'd want to know. Ethan had almost forgotten. Richard Hale, former board member, convicted of corporate sabotage and attempted fraud. The trial had been quick once the evidence went public. 15 years in federal prison. I'll be there. He set the phone down and flipped the pancakes. Daddy, is Victoria coming over again? Mia asked without looking up from her coloring. Probably not this weekend. Why? I like her. She's funny. Ethan smiled. Victoria Blackwood, Ice Queen of Datacrest Technologies, described as funny by a 6-year-old. The same Victoria who'd restructured his entire employment contract after the board meeting, making him director of security with flexible hours, remote work privileges, and a mandate to build a proper team so he'd never have to be the single point of failure again. The same woman who'd personally fired 3 managers who'd been sending their teams non-emergency emails after 7 p.m., with a company-wide memo about work-life balance that had gone viral in the tech industry. The same Victoria who'd shown up at Mia's hospital room 3 days after the pneumonia diagnosis with a stuffed elephant twice the size of the original, and who'd somehow ended up staying for 2 hours, reading picture books in a corner chair, while Mia dozed and Ethan answered emails. Who'd brought coffee. Real coffee, not the hospital cafeteria sludge. Who'd sat there in her business suit looking completely out of place among the colorful murals and beeping monitors. And who'd read Where the Wild Things Are, with the same intensity she brought to quarterly earnings calls. The same Victoria who now texted him every Friday evening to confirm he was actually leaving work at 5 like he was supposed to. She is funny, Ethan agreed. In her own way. I drew her a picture. Mia held up her artwork. It's all of us. Ethan looked at the drawing. 3 stick figures standing in front of a house. A man, a girl, and a woman with long dark hair. Above them, Mia had written in careful block letters, Family. His throat tightened. It's perfect, he said quietly. Outside the window, summer sunshine blazed across a Denver neighborhood, slowly coming back to life after the long winter. The snow was gone, melted away weeks ago. The cold had broken. The streets were alive again with movement and color. Somewhere in the distance, Ethan could hear kids playing in a sprinkler, their laughter carrying through the warm air. A dog barked. An ice cream truck's tinny music drifted past. The world had kept turning. It always did. But for the first time since Sarah died, Ethan felt like he was turning with it instead of being dragged behind. He plated the pancakes, 3 for Mia, 2 for himself, the chocolate chips arranged into exaggerated smiley faces, and sat down across from his daughter at the small kitchen table that had once been buried under work documents and now held nothing but a vase of fresh flowers. Victoria had brought last week. You know what? He said. What? I'm not going anywhere today. What do you want to do? Mia's face lit up like she'd been given the world. Like every Christmas morning and birthday wish rolled into one moment. Really? The whole day? The whole day. No phone. No laptop. No emergencies. She launched herself at him. Pancakes forgotten, throwing her arms around his neck with the fierce intensity only 6-year-olds can manage. Can we go to the park? And get ice cream? And maybe see if the library has that new book about the dragon. All of it, Ethan promised. Every single thing. And maybe, in a way, she had. Because 3 days of snow and 1 desperate email had taught Ethan Cole something he'd forgotten in the years since Sarah died. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fixing the crisis. Sometimes it's letting it break and choosing to be exactly where you're needed most.